I've really been enjoying the contributions that have been coming into Love and Soil, and also finding the pace of the conversation that allows for reflection and consideration when thinking about the different contributions has been really helpful. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the ideas of land sharing and land sparing, which Anna Jones mentioned in one of her recent contributions. And I find the idea of land sparing so problematic. And I think that's because it typifies a human arrogance that we can control nature, that we as a species can determine where nature can or can't be. And it completely ignores the holistic nature of our ecology, of our environment, of our planet, where everything is made up of wholes, WHOLES. And this concept that we can determine that a piece of land is, quote, productive, and as such can be treated in an extractive, intensive way to get as much as we possibly can out of that land. And to think that that won't have any impact on the surrounding ecology is just bonkers. I mean, the inputs that would have to go into that have got to come from somewhere. So that inevitably means if you're going to take a true intensive land sparing approach, that means NP and K all being applied to the land, and that's got to come from somewhere. It means high levels of diesel use. And let's just be very clear here. The climate crisis isn't happening because of agriculture and because of not planting enough trees. It's happening because of fossil fuels and an expansive increase in human population. So, if we want to intensify our production systems to then try and offset that in some way, we are barking very much up the wrong tree. We have to cut the amount of fuel that we are using. Now, if we can do that, and if there is evidence to demonstrate that land sparing significantly reduces fossil fuel use to produce food, then I'll be open to exploring the idea more. But intensification of agriculture is undoubtedly will lead to increased pollution, increased runoff, increased inputs, degraded soils. Our arable soils are already the most degraded soils in our landscapes. And to allocate areas for that with the complete disregard for the impact on the surrounding ecology, unless they're all surrounded by buffer zones, but then the skies above them can't be cleared and birds will inevitably need to land. And I just find this kind of idea that we can command and control just such a fallout from the kind of patriarchal, colonial existence, which has got us into this place that we are now, where we're panicking about the state of the planet. And instead of actually addressing that by reducing our inputs and reducing our extraction, we're still trying to carve up the land in a way that allows for us to carry on these abhorrent practices that are degrading our soils and degrading nature, and kind of get away with that because it's within this particular space, so it's okay. And I just find it really difficult because it just feels like people are disconnecting from the land and disconnecting from the fact that we even call this other thing nature and don't recognise that it is part of who we are and where we are, and we are part of it is something that I find really troubling. If we are always focusing on yield and productivity, and I think Anna talked about this idea of, in Holland they had reduced the number of cattle to meet this kind of magic number, but actually they won't have reduced yield, I don't imagine, and there are some really pretty poor practices in dairy going on across Europe, in massively intensified dairy with huge nitrous oxide, ammonia, risks of pollution and outputs. Cows being bred so that they actually don't represent or reflect the original breed in any way, and are basically just walking milking machines that are given numbers and not names, and aren't known individually, and are very much just seen as a factory production system. And I don't see how that in any way addresses some of the social issues that we currently are experiencing at the moment, where people are way disconnected from food and the land. And it also doesn't address the financial issues. And actually, if our farming practices comes down to debt, then I think all that says is that we've got it very wrong. You know, the amount of production, if we think about the work that Chris Clark has done through Nethergill Associates, and we think about maximum kind of optimal capacity of any land, the natural carrying capacity of the land should be what informs our stocking, not how much debt we might be in. I mean, it just feels so wrong and upside down and disconnected from really recognising that food comes from living systems and we are a part of that living system. I think there are also some issues to address, maybe in terms of our language. You know, we talk about productive or less productive land, but actually what is productive? And if we're talking about nutrient density that can come off that land, then a piece of ground some might consider to be less productive could easily host a herd of native breed cattle on a completely grass-based pastured system with no inputs, whose beef is going to be far more nutrient dense and healthy compared to other grain-fed beef, for example. And the work of Gillian Butler and Hannah Davis is going some way to demonstrate that and continue to increase the evidence base for that. So because the productivity of the land, what is it that we're actually wanting to produce? Is it calories or is it nutrients? 244 hectares of barley were grown in Scotland. I think that was the 2018 data, half of which goes into whiskey or beer. Is that productive? I don't know. Do we need this number of distilleries, breweries? Do we need the choice? I don't know. I'm not sure. And I think maybe the constant search for choice and different types of products on offer and this constant chasing of better or improved is actually what is causing our, I don't know, confusion perhaps over what is productive or what isn't productive. I really worry that we argue around the terminology of production, productive land, or that we think about any sort of intensification as being sustainable. I mean, by its very nature, the more you intensify, the more you rely on outputs, the less sustainable it becomes. So building in a few beetle banks and wildflower strips isn't going to cut the mustard, I'm afraid. It's not going to be enough. And whilst people are worrying about this sort of stuff, the world is literally burning. The global south is coming under direct fire from global climate change. And we are so protected here in the UK from that. We're so protected. We're so privileged to be experiencing, warmer weathers, warmer summers and, warmer weather. And, we've got these horrendous rain events, but actually we can continue to just keep importing all these foods. And so it's fine. And yeah, I genuinely am concerned that we are rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic by thinking about things that don't represent a drastic, massive shift in how we approach land use, how we consider food, how we think about what we spend our time and money on. And this isn't just about let's all go no-till or let's all go organic. This is about how do we massively reduce consumption. How do we massively reduce fossil fuel use? How do we completely change our social structures to represent something more restorative, something more supportive of positive human endeavour that creates life and doesn't continue to strive for extraction, growth and consumption?